Conza, welcome back to the Bitcoin Infinity Show. Nice to have you back.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's early morning for me and late at night for you because we're on opposite ends of the globe. You're in Australia. You've been on the show once before. We met once in Sydney 3 years ago, I think, now almost 3 years ago. And you have always had fantastic takes on everything, in my opinion. I don't know of anyone who's more well read up on the Austro-libertarian ideas and foundations. So while I may not always agree with your sense for diplomacy online, I do agree with almost everything you say, and you're always right, and people get annoyed with it. So I thought you'd be the perfect guest to sort of wrap up the praxeological reasons for why you should be a monetary maximalist and why Bitcoin is money and not a fucking database. We might have to blur out the curse word there for the YouTube algorithm, but I hesitate to call it anything else. Let's get into it. If you want an introduction to Michael Conza, you should watch our last interview, or you have a website too where you can find all these quotes to all of these nice libertarian articles. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So first question, what are the two problems that money solves?
Two problems that money solves. We're going straight there. So what is money if we want to take one little step back? So I'd say the most saleable good in society, which ends up being a medium of exchange. And what money is the most common medium of exchange within a given context. That little bit of within a given context is a tribute to Conrad Graff, who is on that point where often it's money and people get confused where the most common medium of exchange, and they look at okay, jail, the cigarettes they talk about, and not understanding the difference between that and currency, and how, well, it's within that given context, yes, but within the society itself, because what is the most common medium of exchange? And so the question is is Bitcoin money? It's yes, it is for within the context of, say, Bitcoin Maximus, so people where it's used as their store of wealth, savings, technology. It's their most common medium of exchange for them. It's their unit of account. But then within the wider context, say, United States, is Bitcoin the most common medium of exchange? And the question is necessarily well, what within what context? And so no, I mean, that's the end up goal of what we want, just as we understand from a praxeological perspective as we get into it, where these commodities, so money is in its essence a commodity, is how Rothbard kind of summarized it. It's not a kind of a token, useless token needed for exchange. All monies, we refer back to Minga and Mises, competing amongst other goods, and over time the one with the best monetary properties kind of wins out in those competitions. And so individuals trade that, and then becomes obviously the most common one you want to hold. But in terms of understanding that, so that's the most within a certain context. What is money? And then you've got the problems it solves. So what is it trying to solve? So initially, it's the double coincidence of wants. So you used to have barter, and you're looking to trade. I need to now find something that you want, or good that you want, and then vice versa. So that becomes a hard thing to do. And then essentially, yes, it solves a problem like a double coincidence of wants, where you're able to then just have money. So there's that commodity that is more saleable in society. So if you hold that, it's gold historically, right? You're able to then get a better chance of trading that for the things that you want or need, and it's able to store that quote unquote wealth over time. And so it's kind of a insurance against uncertainty is what money is. It's the most saleable good. It's you've got something in stocks or whatever it is. If you need that for instant gratification of something for purchase, there's barriers to that. Where with money, cash, Bitcoin, you're able to use that and satiate those needs. So what are the problems that money solves? One is the double coincidence of wants. And as it goes through that process is essentially, so it ends up being the unit of account. So the most common money medium of exchange in society is money, and then it's obviously becomes a common unit of account. that enables the ability to rationally allocate resources given the common unit. So economic calculation is essentially the answer to that. The example of like if you know what's presupposed by that. So it's if you don't have property, you don't have if you don't have property, then you're not able to. There's no market. Then you're not able to exchange goods. Essentially, then you don't have. If you're not able to do that, you don't have prices. And if you don't have prices, then you're not able to rationally calculate anything. And the best analogy I've seen is and this is the best argument against socialism that exists, which is from Mises, which is the economic calculation argument, or the inability for states to rationally allocate resources. It's kind of think about you're the benevolent dictator. You know, historically that's the one party ruler, whether that's you know, Hitler, whoever, the socialists, the national socialists, but then you've got the international socialists as well, so the Marxists, the communists, Lenin, all that. You've got the dictator, but even assuming, Mises assumes goodwill from all the populace, so everyone's a commie, everyone's a socialist, everyone's on board with and agrees with what the ruler wants to do. It's, okay, assuming 100% all of that, how do you choose whether your resources from that would go to make a house or to burn a fire, to build a train station or a school? And so how do you do that without money, being able to rationally allocate those resources and let the market choose? It's a plan, it's a central plan, but you're not able to do it rationally in that sense. It's then politics and all that other stuff comes into it. So yeah, those are the two problems money solves. And then I could go on to essentially what Bitcoin additionally solves, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll go into that. I just want to add 2 points. I think there's a Hopper quote about, you said something, insurance against uncertainty. And I think there's a Hopper quote saying that money is the best insurance against uncertainty available. And I really like that definition. I like it more than like sort of on a societal, which is the most dominant form, because that's sort of subjective in a way, I guess, like everything else. At least in terms of what money ought to be, it ought to be the best insurance against uncertainty possible. And in that sense, like that's also one of the arguments for why Bitcoin is so superior to fiat, because fiat will lose value over time. We don't know where Bitcoin's value goes. We know where it goes over long periods of time if it works. We know that it goes to either zero or approaching infinity, but to be blunt, we definitely know that fiat will lose value, which is why it doesn't work, which is why the money is broken. There was another thing I thought about there, but I lost that, I think. So let's go on to, so why it's, yeah, let's see how to frame this. Like, applying this to Bitcoin, what kind of conclusions can we draw?
Yeah, so knowing what money is, the conclusion, just straight jumping to the end here, is so like Bitcoin's a rivalrous digital commodity on an open source monetary network. And so unpacking that, Conza Graffiti has a solid breakdown. Well, we can see, so Bitcoin is an economic good, kind of step one. Step two is then it's a rival good, which is a subtype of scarce good. And so rivalrous, meaning, so what's the best way to frame it? So often the use of scarcity is used, but not as, I'd say, accurate, or can sometimes lead to confusing conclusions. And the intellectual property kind of debate is a part of this, where, I have a recipe or something and I'm hiding it from you, and it's like, that's scarce, or I've got something like that, where it's not used, where it's like the use of rivalrous is in terms of like conflict. And so it's a type of rival good known as a commodity, and then a new type of commodity called a digital commodity with unprecedented monetary characteristics. And so, yeah, it's, let's say, like part of that unpacking Bitcoin, what it is, it's that rivalrous digital commodity, open source monetary network. Within that, how to look at it is, so there's like a unit perspective and a systems perspective. It's that duality of sorts that is fairly prevalent in looking from a praxeological perspective, where you may have the kind of you've got, say, like the a priori or the prior to experience framework. So for a praxeological law, like it's set up in the form of if X and Y remains unchanged, then Z will result. And that's like, think about it as the formula of sorts. And then it's like, okay, well, in this instance, like what happened exactly?
Yeah, that's the all else being equal scenario.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. An imaginary scenario. So this is TLDR on praxeology here. This is how you praxeologically attack problems. Just as you said, if X and Y remains the same, then Z has to follow. So what you do is you think of an imaginary scenario where all else is being equal, this being the Y in the equation, then it logically follows that Z must be the result of X, right?
Exactly. And then it's kind of seeing the situation like, okay, is that what happened? Like, and you're able to give you a more powerful tool to understand the sort of theory behind that. And then it's like, where is it illustrating or not? So you've got, say, that foundation, and from a legal lens, there's definitional in the sense of like, what is theft? You know, this is the definition of theft. What is aggression? You know, and then it's like, okay, we know what that is now. Like in the specific case, it's like, okay, well, did that bike, you know, whose bike was that, or did it get stolen? Like, who we can then objectively and intersubjectively ascertain in an attainable way determine. Well, yeah, we can agree that like I threw fists or someone threw fists at me, and you know who struck first and whatnot. So for Mises, and I think recently, a bit of the Theory and History is an amazing book he's got, where it is that breakdown of, so you've got praxeology on one kind of the think about systems lens, and there's like thymology, which is another word for like psychology of why, and essentially you can look at the action and why that happened in intent. And so kind of those two things together can present that whole of like what's happened. But looking at Bitcoin while we've got that lens, Chronograph does an amazing job of breaking down. Well, there's an element that it's rivalrous, and that's part of the innovation, where within the digital realm, there's intellectual, digital IP. Like, I don't need to spend a whole rabbit hole on like why intellectual property is invalid, where essentially it violates the property rights of others. It's like monopoly of thought of like and this is the element of non-scarce goods, where it's not a just a way to go things. But so Bitcoin has an element of that, where like the blockchain is copyable, and sometimes people get confused and mixed up, like, well, it's not worth anything in that regard. But then also there's a lens of the ownership. It's like definitional stuff. So like, this will be important later as we discuss spam, so bear with me. But it's like, okay, you've got the on-chain piece and there's definitions. So ownership. So ownership is like the exclusive right to control, where you're justified in using force to protect and defend your right. And then you've got possession, which is effective control. And so whether it's depending on the context and the audience, and I obviously this is better than the normies by a long shot, whether you bother to have these type of discussions, but it becomes important when you're trying to look at reality, and we discuss like, do you actually own ordinals, and like, what's it mean to own? And by consequence, also we talk about Bitcoin. And it's like, well, so Chronograph has a book monograph addressing this, written in like 2015. And so would highly encourage everyone to kind of read that, or it provides
are Bitcoins ownable is the
and
that's the title of the book,
PDF, right? Available as well, like 85 pages. There isn't a better, I'd say, just value-free, unbiased approach that Conrad kind of is very known for, and tearing down, like, not big words for the sake of it per se, but being incredibly accurate anyway. So long story, he does a solid job of breaking that down, but it's like, the answer is, you can't, and this is where we're jumping to the end here and I throw people off, but not able to actually own, so exclusive right to control Bitcoin. Like, nothing on the time chain or blockchain says, Conza has a right to this UTXO or anything. Like, private keys could be stolen and lost and whatnot. And so, but the answer is, well, does it really matter if we don't, per se, where it's through private property, through nodes, the computers, our own, like someone breaks in or hacks or trespasses, that's the private property rights violation that can be in place. And so it's not the fact that So you can't have ownership of them. And Stephan Kinsella talks about this as well. He's got a whole lecture on it, that essentially it's the other rights violations, though, that can still, like, seeking damages where you trespass and all there's damage, where you stole, you got the private key access to that and then stole Bitcoins and stuff. So the reason why that is important, which is, you can talk about later on, it's around, ordinals and ownership of, quote unquote ownership of JPEGs and dick butts and all that, and what spam is and how that relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah, to further cement this, first of all, Conrad Graf, look him up, is one of our favorite thinkers, and he's very, very underappreciated in the Bitcoin community, I think, and we should hear more of him. But let's talk about what he's doing right now and stuff later on. The other thing is, in my mind, and when I try to explain this to people, I talk about this difference between ownership and possession a lot, and also that Bitcoin is really neither. It's on a deeper level, because you can't really own Satoshis. What you can control is a private key. So you can know the location of a hardware wallet and the passphrase to it. You can know your 12 words. You can know the actual private key. But at the end of the day, it's all about keeping a secret from other people. That's the only thing that allows you to act as if you own the Bitcoin. But in reality, no information is actually ownable. It's just that this thing allows you to interact with other people in a way that resembles money rather than is money, and resembles a commodity rather than being one, because it's and I find this part of the rabbit hole to be endlessly fascinating, because what it means in my mind is that all the Bitcoins live in someone's head. We are the network, literally, not metaphorically, but there is not a single sat that exists, or the ability to move it is always within a human brain and nowhere else. Just a quick comment on that. Do you agree with that framing, or is it overcomplicating things?
I think you couldn't completely deduce it to that, in isolation, but in essence, yeah, I agree, where it's your human actions required. It's not just, and I think I had a thought experiment way back where it was trying to push back against, I think it's the similar thing you're pushing back against, and it was I think the concept was what would happen if there was no one touched, Bitcoin, the human race ended, so to speak. How long would it take for Bitcoin to last? And there was some interesting historical that had been raised apparently years back in discussions for it. And so it's been a few years where I saw that, but the essence of it was wouldn't last long at all, in terms of hash rate and electricity and all that, and what's it really matter, and then how long would it last, and then say that someone came back after a certain period of time, how long would it take to resurrect? And yeah, anyway, so it was I'll try and find that, but it's interesting to think about around, what is it, driving to the point of you've raised, which is what is it? And it was, the indication was humans matter. It's I think the trope was is along the lines of Bitcoin doesn't give a shit or whatever, or one of these things about everything's good for Bitcoin type comments. Yeah, which, rail against, as you know. So yeah.
Yeah, the whole code is law thing. Code is only law because we make it.
Talk about later. But
yeah. And law is another term that is fascinating, because legal and lawful are two very different things. And we'll get into that later too. There's another thought experiment. What if Hal Finney, who cryo-froze his head when he died, memorized a private key and is resurrected 400 years later and moves the Bitcoin? This completely changes everything about saving, hodling. What these terms actually mean is so abstract and so ephemeral, or whatever you can. There is a very weird aspect to this, in it being so abstract, and this is also, there's a reason for bringing all of this hippie mumbo jumbo up, and that is the same arguments can be made for owning an NFT or owning spam, because people think that that is also subjective and also, in your head, and you're just keeping a secret from someone and blah, blah, blah. And one of the hardest things for me when explaining Bitcoin to others is explaining why the Satoshi is sacred in this sense and why nothing else is or can be. So, and that's going to be hard to unpack, but yeah. Where do you want to take this next? Like, where's the next logical step to explaining these things?
Well, for me, it kind of comes down to, like, as we're getting to, there's changes to being proposed to Bitcoin by who and what, and when, and whether it should be or not. But it always comes down to, like, the quality of money. Like, is Bitcoin I feel like every BIP or any, said action of sorts from developers or anyone on Bitcoin, it's like, hey, does this improve Bitcoin's quality of money or reduce it? And it kind of, as simple as that. And we can kind of actually talk more about the quality of money and what that is.
Let's take that from the very beginning. Sorry for interrupting here, but I think I got a good angle. Gold has other use cases than the monetary use case. It's used in industry and it's used for jewelry. And it's been argued that makes gold a worse form of money. Why is that?
Sorry, why is it as a worse form of money? I guess for me, it comes into, like, Mises regression theorem, right? Like, it's how can you trace back essentially to a non-monetary use for whatever has become money. And Mises essentially says it has to be the case that there was essentially a non-monetary use. My actual angle is, and this is what Conrad Graff convinced me of otherwise, where I originally 2010 days, first time it was being discussed on Mises community forums. We're trying to figure out, does the Mises regression theory apply to Bitcoin, and does it invalidate it or validate it? But it was Conrad Graff who pointed out that essentially Bitcoin is the best example and best well documented and illustrated example of Mises regression theorem, which essentially makes the case that wasn't circular. Like, a lot of it was always money is valuable because it's valuable, but it's like, no, hang on. If you trace the answer is time, is what Mises said, and you trace it back to a certain point, it was originally valued for some other non-monetary use. And so often the question, but I see people propose this towards Bitcoin that it doesn't have any, and that's good. And so my actual angle is, along with Conrad Graff, it's like, no, it has non-monetary purposes. When it initially started, it didn't start with a price. It was essentially 2010 was like no price, and then anyway, Conrad Graff, it's like there's early value components he kind of talks about where it was following a non-medium exchange value, and he kind of, there's 5 of them of sorts, which he's got a great part of an article on. But one of it is, it's like, it doesn't matter what it was, but it's, even if it's just like speculative thinking, like long term, this could be worth something in down the track. It's like kind of digital collectibles. If it's like F the state, separation of money and state, this is amazing. And I get the value out of that, of just having the ideas, discussing like whatever it is. They've still imparted that, even if it's like toy-like digital objects of sorts, there's all these examples, illustrations of it having that non-monetary value. So moving forward, but yeah, so drawing that to, I guess, gold, like the historical case has always been commodity money has had alternate uses, and that's helped kind of, I guess, bootstrap it or move forward. But Rothbard also has an example, talks about it in Man, Economy and State, where even if something lost its, so there's a like gold, like loses its non-monetary uses, and it's just, it can still actually carry on. I use the words like extant or something, like regardless of that. But then also vice versa, like it can lose its monetary premium as well. So like if gold or silver getting demonetized, then the value can drop considerably per se, all else being equal, and then maybe those other use cases would be used for that, or maybe that would change. Sorry, did I get was the
Yeah. So in my mind, Bitcoin absolutely proves Mises' regression theorem, because we have the exact date where it becomes money, and that is Pizza Day. That is when Lasso buys the 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins. That's the exact moment where a collectible turns into a medium of exchange. So it's super simple. Now, the thing I was fishing for is sort of more like, the other use cases for gold than the monetary use case makes it harder for people to price gold properly, right? Because those use cases distort the price somewhat. And the question I'm leaning into from that perspective is like, is this also true for the other quote unquote use cases for Bitcoin that aren't really use cases other than for the spammer themselves? But like the mispricing of the thing, is sort of what I'm fishing for.
Gotcha. Great question. I guess because they've got those differing uses per se, where like I know there's actually buying pure bullion, gold bars of sorts, like for in Australia here anyway, you don't get there's no capital gains perhaps on that. But then if it's like gold coins, like it's collectibles, then there's something slightly different, although it's got that commodity within it, it's treated differently. It's not from a pure monetary perspective. It has to be like 99.9% or something. So there is different pricing already. Like just if you're looking to buy any, whilst it's the same commodity, you're paying a premium for the stamping or the minting of it in certain ways. So you're right. It can, but I guess from I actually give that example as well. If you're trying to get at like, well, if you have, I put out a poll or a tweet where it was essentially, if you had money like gold, was like historically, say we was talking about gold, and you added confetti to it, you sprinkled confetti onto it, like sprinkles and sparkles and whatever. Like, would that get more, or like would that be you consider that was reduced its quality as money or improved it? And it was like 80% were like it reduced its quality, and like what is this? And is that kind of by like it's kind of the Walter Block kind of joke of in say with Rothbard talking about, Rothbard notes and he'd take them, just being pieces of paper with Rothbard on it. But like someone trying to make that kind of joke where it's slightly different. It's like, no, people will be like, what the hell is this? And you've reduced it and you've like, it's not a monetary thing. This is what we're after. So I think along similar lines, when we talk about specifically Bitcoin, I think it's even more clear cut where, the open source monetary network, like it's a rivalrous digital commodity, and the whole point of the network is a peer-to-peer, electronic cash system. It's all about Bitcoin as the unit, and then you got the system, and it's meant to facilitate sending, receiving, essentially quote unquote storing that, and what the ordinals, like Casey Rodamore has admitted they have nothing, or ordinals have nothing to do with Bitcoin, the asset itself. And to the question is, well, what does it have to do with being on the network then? Like why Bitcoin open source monetary network? As you say, it's an abuse case. And that thing I prompted him, it's like it's almost got 15,000 views and I don't get many views, just spamming that everywhere, more or less over the years since, February, WTF, what happened in February 2023.com. Since then, and that was since the bug exploit has been promulgated, where there was no BIP, there's no consensus, no discussion, and has been exploited, and Bitcoin Core admitted it's been exploited, but they had also then have adopted its changed definition of data carrier size. Essentially, it said it's now a feature, not a bug. Or they fixed a bug by updating the documentation, which is also something we've been ranting about. But long story, no one from getting pushback from the other quote unquote other side, the Bitcoin is a database, store my dick butts forever side, have had anyone has peeped up with a retort or an answer to, well, how do you justify this stuff that your creator admits of ordinals admits and the exploiter himself admits it has nothing to do with it, an open source monetary network, like why is it there? And spam is, and we do have a definition for spam, which is non-monetary data, where it's not subjective.
Where does the definition come from, though?
So like I guess from it's like understanding what money is, and if their claim is on their own terms is Bitcoin is money, then on their own terms they have to admit that and they already have essentially that it's nothing to do with the open source monetary network, right? But do you mean where that definition comes from? Well, to me, like logic, reason, and it's essentially definitional in terms of like, well, the white paper, Bitcoin's intent, what Satoshi described as, Bitcoin is a commodity. You're able to now transfer that, the problems it solves, which is, we talk about money, what the problems that solves, and then Bitcoin is the additional problem it solves, which is, trusted third parties. So there's no need for trusted third parties anymore. And so it's, with all that in mind, it's then you have, I think, pretty clear cut definition around what is and what isn't monetary. And it's like this one plus, like, so praxeology is a priori, as you know, it's kind of prior to experience. It's the equivalent or akin to mathematics, like applied logic. So, 1 + 1 = 2 is as simple as that. It's like, we know that it's definitional. So similarly along the lines of like what we know from praxeology, like the logic and science of action, if X and Y remains unchanged, then Z will result. If you accept it as money, which these guys, a lot of them do, like Brian Trolls or whatever his name is, Shinobi.
Yeah.
For a long time, we're trying to push the angle of Bitcoin as a database, and it feels like there was a clicking point with Shitcoin magazine or whatever, like this is not working and this is actually negatively not helping them at all. And so he's shut up, so to speak, or he's acknowledges inadvertently that it's a crummy argument. I don't necessarily think he's overtly done so, but just for no longer harping about it. But then you hear like Adam Back, kind of what we have seen is kind of come to the fore, and it's this lip service from the devs around Bitcoin Core, anyone associated that, oh yeah, Bitcoin's money, and then like, okay, let's just carry on. But they have no understanding of what money actually is. When you ask them, which I have multiple times, like what is the simple, like what problems does money solve? What problems does Bitcoin solve? Essentially, just crickets. And it's the dev syndrome is merch pays lip service to it. We've got Gloria Zhao, like, these viral clips that have happened that Matt has done.
Crater, yeah,
done an amazing job at Bitcoin University highlighting this stuff, where it's just very clear cut that, you've got no idea what money actually is, and you overtly admit that you can't talk about Bitcoin from a monetary perspective. And then that's the challenge where, well, if you don't have any economic literacy and you're working on humanity's best chance at freedom money, like, what are you doing? And it's either acknowledging you don't understand, yes, you're a super tech dev and you understand the code, but human action, and we know is vital, incentives, then in economics at its core is it's like seeing the seen and the unseen and understanding that as a whole, what policy, what different approaches can have. And then incentive structures and whether it's like improving or reducing the quality of money. Like how in the world can you improve, understand what improves or reduces the quality of money, which is Bitcoin, if you don't know economics and basic sense. So the worry is like, it's they should be at least acknowledging, like someone wise would understand, yes, that's a gap, and I can go to consult someone, or the community, the plebs who are very much overtly more monetary and have more monetary understanding, and in many cases have more conviction, life savings. They've read the Bitcoin standard. There's no animosity to all that. It's actually, which we see a lot of devs with towards, I've seen from Safe, about Safe and all that approach where they've for whatever reason, they're in a little bubble. They need to, they have some other kind of understanding or no understanding at all of Bitcoin, of basic economics. And so they don't see that there's a lot of red flags that essentially happen where they've also admitted like they're not, there's an open secret. So Jeremy Rubin, there's a clip with Casey Rodimer with Jeremy Rubin, who turns out, had direct connection to Epstein, but he's admitting it's an open secret among the dev community that they don't run their own nodes. They don't, you're not sending transactions. So there's a whole litany of things where
I'm going to have to devil's advocate some of this stuff.
Okay.
One, for the sake of argument, but also because I think there's a danger here in the monetary Marxist side being too conspiratory. And like, I love Matthew Crater's videos, but I think sometimes he draws conclusions that are not easily provable. And also this whole notion of core devs not knowing what money is. may be true for a lot of them, but don't believe it's true for all of them. There's the argument they would make, and the counter argument here that Merch would make is, for instance, and I hope I'm representing him correctly here, is that it's futile to do anything about this. They say that these filters have proven to not work since it's just policy and you can override all the stuff. It, in a sense, is a database because you can put any type of data you want into it. And the rationale they're giving for increasing the op return, for instance, is that would somewhat incentivize people putting their shit data there instead of trashing the chain. I personally think that's a horrid decision because it sends the message that this shit is okay to begin with, and that's why I'm so vehemently against it, because I don't think it is, because I don't think it holds any merit. But I can agree to that to a certain extent, that it's very hard to do anything about it except try to educate people why shitcoins are shit. Like, so what would you say to that? What would you say to like policy being changed? Actually, if you take their argument to be sincere, if you give them the benefits of the doubt that they're doing this.
Yeah, no, and I think
what would you say to that?
Well, the thing is, we can give the benefit of the doubt, like completely, which is they're not bad actors. There's no VC funding. There's no strings attached. Actually means no strings attached. There's Brink. There's Chain Code Labs. Like all those necessarily folks with bad actor status, red flags around them that are like hovering. Ignoring all that, that's why the economic literacy argument I think is so powerful, is because on your own terms, like understanding, okay, Merch accepts Bitcoin's money, but it's that comes back to that not understanding seeing the seen and the unseen, or the counterfactual, or the counterfactual compared to argument, all else being equal. It's like, well, what are you looking at specifically, and that next action? Is it making it easier or harder? Is it reducing Bitcoin's quality as money, or improving it? And they like to claim that, it's improving it because, going down the pathway of this cat and mouse game.
Yeah, the argument would be that increasing the op return size actually improves Bitcoin's usage as money, because the spammers would put their shit there instead of at more dangerous places.
Yeah,
or more
and they completely ignore though, like the human actions, as if there's a vacuum. I know they put their dev mindset on, and it's like a game theory, and all they do is like end result is like, yes, you do this quote unquote cat and mouse game, and you get to the end point where like, fake pub keys on the time chain, and well, that's what they're going to do. But it's like, no, hang on. There's an understanding of like, well, the signal that gets sent and the quality of decision being made, and yes, what you lean into in terms of whether it's being invited or not. Is this good or not? Or what are we signaling, whether this is okay or not? Like spam on humanity's best chance of freedom money. To me, it's like so they don't understand that element to it, where we've historically, and this is where it gets hard to give them the benefit of the doubt, where what has worked in the past? This is the op return wars 2. The first one we won. Why? And it's like there's this amazing article that kind of lays it all out, that has been shared a million times. Bitfinex, what was the? I'll put in the show notes. But that article where it takes through
BitMEX research, right?
Yes, something like that. Yes. Where essentially like the op return was 2014, and the answer was like the cyberpunks, those who are more monetary orientated, I'd say back then, understood what Bitcoin was, money only, and then it goes. Get stuff like, no, this, essentially Satoshi Dice being part of that was around a different period, was like, no, it's like 50%, it's non-monetary, get stuff, go away, we're going to make your life harder. And essentially, the result of that in that article is like Ethereum being created, they left, and then you get all the shitcoin spam and quote unquote free market libertarian scammer stuff.
In hindsight, I love the shitcoins. Like, I love that they did that, and that they did their own shit on their own chains, and they didn't mess with Bitcoin for 10 years. Like, in hindsight, that was fantastic.
Then they've come back, and that's the challenge of, instead of being the OGs who were like, well, no, you can't come back. And yes, okay, you found a bug exploit that we're now going to fix. And that's what Luke wanted to do and proposed. But then becomes even harder, like, to assume good faith when you were literally quoting like Greg Maxwell from back in the day. You have Gloria Zhao, you have not her, Ava Chow, where he was like, there's some posts where he's basically saying get stuffed. Rug the Spam is the equivalent of 10 years ago, and then now his tune's changed. And so it's like they're almost arguing against themselves, like what's happened to change that? You can either just, yes, the economic ignorance, and for A. Chow's piece, he went to university and came out admittedly with a, I guess woke in that sense is how we'd probably characterize it. But it's like, well, the economic literacy angle, that's enough, I think, to explain the issues that are being faced. For in terms of just, but then there's not that. It's just there's all these other red flags as well, where it's the censorship, it's the delayed censorship on the mailing list with various proposals. It's going back where, like,
I mean, sorry to interrupt again, but yeah, to clarify here, I do recognize that there is a ton of red flags. For instance, Eric Voorhees was one of the guy behind Satoshi Dice, the guy we threw out a long time ago, a decade ago. He is now an investor in Citria, for instance, which is the current bigger spam corporation attempt. And an obvious bad actor, in my opinion. He started a shitcoin exchange just to extract people's sats from them, giving legitimacy to all this other shit. This is what these people do over and over again. It's I like Bitcoin, buy my shitcoin. That's the mantra. They're gonna do that over and over again, and it's gonna reiterate. It's gonna take different forms every time, but it's the same scheme, right? It's a way. They have realized that sats are insanely valuable and are only going to be more valuable in the future, but they're stuck in this fiat evil villain, supervillain mindset of, therefore I should try to scam everyone out of their sats. It's bad acting. And to me, one of the more beautiful parts of Bitcoin is that that's where resilience resides. That's why because we kick these people out, that's why it works. It's not because this wall of digital energy. That's part of how we come to consensus on shit, but still the consensus has to be around that this is money. Otherwise it doesn't work. Otherwise it doesn't have the internal system to pay itself, to pay its own players. The miners get paid in sats. There's a reason for that they don't get paid in a briefcase full of dollar bills or something else. They're supposed to have an incentive to like sats. So the reason I don't want to go too hard on the red flags of the connections between people and who might be doing what here is exactly that I think that the economic arguments are enough, and I want people to truly grasp them, because that's what truly will kill the spam, is if no one falls for this shit anymore. The way I see it, buying an NFT or buying an ordinal and having it forever on the time chain, it just means buying a star in the Andromeda galaxy, except because I cannot interact with it in any other way than any other person on Earth can. The ownership means nothing if that's the case, because everyone else can see it too. Everything else around it is always on a third-party website. The problem here is that this very contract for owning the star in the Andromeda galaxy fucks up my telescope, which is my node.
Yeah.
The reason the fact that they're doing this, that they're sort of graffitiing the contract on the telescope.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe a bad metaphor, but I'm trying to visualize how this is detrimental and why people should absolutely grok this. But yeah, so let's go on here. Where were we? You should check out our latest sponsor, BitVault. BitVault is real hardcore Bitcoin security. They combine multisig with a time delay so that they discourage thieves from using $5 or $15 or $21 wrenches to bash your head in. This time lock function increases the risk for the thief, discourages coercion, and makes the whole act less likely to happen. Go to bitvault.sv right now and check out their offers. You can get a yearly subscription for $129, and it's a fantastic product overall. Brush your teeth. Our favorite hardware wallet is, of course, the Bitbox. Check out our friends at Bitbox at bitbox.swiss. There you'll find a bunch of different products, but the main one, the Bitbox O2 Nova with the Bitcoin firmware installed, is a fantastic hardware wallet, and the software that comes along with it has a fantastic user interface. It is one of my personal favorites. It's easy to use and it's super secure. It's my personal favorite hardware wallet. It's super slick, super privacy focused, and super easy to use. So go to bitbox.swiss, and Swiss, and use code Infinity for a discount. Check it out now.
Yeah. Well, what came to mind there, I mean, like on the graffiti thing, and like going back to like not laying out, going to the who's doing what type thing. I think there's an element of that that's important. Like Rothbard talks about, it's not just, so talking about like, I guess the conspiracy element to it. For me, it's historically always been like, say you go down to Alex Jones' rabbit hole when you start getting into Liberty or whatever, and it's like, it's unnecessary, where it's always like, oh, look at this doco, or this person's doing this. It's all empirical. It's all requires evidence, case-based stuff, blah, blah, blah. Whereas the more powerful arguments are logic-based, which you can bring to the fore regardless of where you are, and it's often on their own terms. And this is why I do lean into the economic literacy piece in terms of the devs and whatever. It's like, okay, well, if you accept Bitcoin as money, and then all the monetary economic, like the knowledge of Austrian economics, and we have understanding is behind us. And so on your own terms, what you are proposing, whether it's op return or whatever it is, those changes that they make, opening up the abuse cases from our angle, like we can indicate that like it's the means you are using are not going to obtain the ends that you're after.
What would you say if they said that they disagreed with praxeology epistemologically? Like if they refuse the whole axiomatic first principles
so
thing?
If they like, no, Bitcoin, it might be, like if it's instead of going, yes, it is money, they go, no, it's a database. Is that?
Well, no. More like, yes, it is money, but money is not what Rothbard says it is. It's this. Like I believe in modern monetary economics or whatever.
Look, I'd love to have those kind of like actual conversations, but no, they can't even answer the question of what problem money solves. Like it's beyond a joke. It's to be fair, and I've pressed, hey, basically dunk on me. I'm calling you out multiple times, multiple areas. And yeah, it's just crickets. And it's not just because I don't think like, I'm an asshole or whatever. It's like, no, it's hey, if you've got an asshole and you're open to dunking on him severely, then you know the answer and you're confident with it, then take it. And the answer, it's not like, do you like chocolate or vanilla? It's like subjective. It's like, no, the answer is 1 + 1 is 2. It's clear cut. You can tell me it's 2 and dunk on me. That's why I kind of try, like iron's meant to sharpen iron a bit in the approach to things. But when X person gets called out and they've said they agree that Bitcoin's money, it's like, okay, well, what problems does it solve? And you get nothing. I mean, what are you going to do with that? Like, yeah. So, and the textbook dev syndrome is like, so Stefan Casella's got a awesome little scenario where essentially it's critiquing engineers, which are devs in particular, but it's like they've got a tendency, there's 5 kind of things, which I think you just read and you go, oh, that's Bitcoin core in general. But it's like, one is they overestimate the applicability of technical thinking. So they kind of have an engineering mindset. It's all about empirical problem solving stuff. But they think that like having a political, economic or philosophical approach is inappropriate and insufficient. It's all about engineering. Number 2 is like neglect theory and intellectual tradition. So anything established, like in social science, humanities, if there's got no respect for, no one, generally speaking, no understanding for, and they try and build theories from scratch. 3 is they're influenced by scientism. So it's like scientism being, it's applying the scientific method, but to humanities, the social sciences, which is inappropriate. We can talk about why that is, but it's actually less scientific, where science means correct knowledge, which is like the kind of the origin of that term. And then you got 4, which is they got a blind spot for like subjectivism in Austrian economics. And then 5, they kind of suffer from a kind of intellectual arrogance. So, which is a pattern with engineers who's identified, like they conquer their own field and they suddenly think they've got the ability to do that for elsewhere, other disciplines. So coming back to that top piece, that's what I see. And yes, it's like, I love to evolve to have those actual conversations, but they can't even get off the ground. And I've been pushing for people to be involved. And it's almost the point of like, I think every BIP, they talk about that needs to play, like a Bitcoin improvement protocol a proposal needs to be like it's a technical only. But for me, it's like monetary element needs to be part of that. If it's Bitcoin is money, then they like propose like 4 or 5 different questions, but it's like how do the answer, like you're proposing something, how does it improve Bitcoin? What are the monetary properties that are being improved? Are there any trade-offs? Like the variety of different things that is not being incorporated, and they think the challenge is they think they know. They read something like Eric Vescooli's Crypto Economics or whatever, which is basically glorified Wikipedia articles, and thinks that if you think Bitcoin is market fiat, that's your framing. Like immediate red flags, and I can go on, but yeah, that's what they kind of hold up. They don't read what I see, Bitcoin standard. They're reading that junk, and yeah. And then the problem is they think they know something like economics, or they've gone to university and they think they know economics, and that's actually harder. You more thickets of knowledge you have to decompress from or throw out, as opposed to being a blank slate and you can proceed in a clear way.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the a priori, it's so basic and yet so misunderstood. Like if you throw a rock into a pond, you can calculate when the rock will hit the sea floor. And if you throw a human being into the pond, you have no idea what the human being will do, because they can swim in any direction. They can dive deep into the pond. They can do whatever they want. And this is why praxeology is fundamentally different from the empirical sciences. You cannot measure and expect to get equal results every time you measure, because the market is always dynamic, always changing. It's never the same thing. It is a process. It's not a thing in itself. Like so the epistemology and the methodology here, I think it's super important. One of my favorite Austrian economics books I mention a lot is Economic Science and the Austrian Method by Hans Hermann Hoppe, where he points out how Mises actually bridged the two worlds between the subjective and the objective, and it's beautiful. And I think Bitcoin has such a potential to be the ultimate tool to actually build that bridge between the two worlds, where human wants and needs can actually materialize in the most efficient way possible by having great money. So let's go on. What's your technical background? Like, how technical would you characterize yourself as?
Yeah, I would often. There's like a BISC presentation I did at Bitcoin Alive, which you presented at a few times, like 2024, where I'm not that technical guy. Like I would say, sat on the sidelines. I was on board theoretically. We're talking 2013 or whatever. Conrad Graf convinced me, but it was sitting on the sidelines for quite some time. Given the practical side of things, the more technical side of things is what I was more of the barrier or blocker at that point. But given the forced interest of sorts, where used to have this mythology around Bitcoin Core and what the devs being the most the most reviewed source codes that are in existence and all this type of stuff, and then seeing the actual reality a bit more behind the scenes, where Marcellus picks up they redefined data carrier size, and it was pushed through next to no discussion, no indication around that. That's okay, open my eyes a little bit. So it's kind of forced me in a way to become a whole lot more technically focused. So I'm on that kind of journey, so to speak, but I wouldn't characterize myself as being completely across it. But this is my kind of, I think I've had that pushback before of sorts, where in terms of, it's in response to the changes that Core have been pushing through, and knowing from a monetary perspective and understanding their claims or what they think, how it improves it, but not being overt at all. So even just the but as it's not myself in isolation, right? There's a lot more smarter people, technical on our side per se, who also are completely aligned. And you're talking about folks like Luke, who's saved Bitcoin several times, objectively speaking.
It's a devil's advocate's argument I feel compelled to make, because it applies to me too. Both you and I are more from the monetary perspective than from the coding perspective. And ideally, you want this the intersection of the Venn diagram. You want your core devs to be in there, like technical and monetary, and that's what we're trying to get at here. I mean, yeah, and Luke certainly seems like a guy that is in that intersection. However, I disagree with Luke on a lot of other topics, but I don't think that necessarily dilutes my faith in him as a good force for Bitcoin or whatever. Like, I don't doubt his ability to think straight on this stuff, especially given his history, that where he has been proven right many times over. So yeah, the whole.
Yeah, there's no cult of personality here. Like, it's for us, it's reason logic based, and I've historically been
which
banned by Luke, and going down, like, talk about statism or whatever. But he's definitely something who, I'd say, like, intuitive. Like, he used to probably see it as, it was interviewed like a cool, like the devs currently do, like a cool tech project, but that changed into or along the lines where you've seen it's overtly, it's like, no, humanity's best chance of freedom money, essentially, and understands that. And so intuitively though, where it's like decentralization here, I think he's on the pulse, and like, if that no longer is the case, well, it's like, we're not going to go off a cliff or anything. So, but it's definitely where. Yeah, you're right. We want the devs to, whoever is making and proposing those changes, to understand, human action and the consequences of certain things, but also, being crossed out and being both. So, like, I think historically, I think there's a bit of an angle of with the number going up, where plebs who have like done the work. And I've seen this some other friends where they've, have more time, where they say retiring or whatever it is, not retiring, but focusing, or more of an incentive to protect their stack. And if that is then involving learning to code, learning, grokking Bitcoin, essentially from a technical perspective, like they need to, and you have more of a self-interest as the value proposition goes up to do that. And then I think also captures a bit of why, like, the devs, I think they don't state it, like the spam perspective, where they don't say, oh, the security budget is a concern, but they can write it off, where if you thought that it's a threat, it's a problem, like at some point the miners are not going to get paid, given the more block rewards down the track, and then fees are the only thing going to carry stuff. Like, what then? You get a death spiral of people not, like, why would you mine, type thing, where it's like, no, if you've got X amount of Bitcoin, and it's like, you want to, there's a self-interest to secure that in a sense of like protect it, or decide what it goes in the next block, or where the hash is being pointed at. You have, an incentive. So like, well, maybe it's like 1% of your wealth, 10%, 5%, 10%, as even just a pleb to join, and as an educational perspective as well. So I think that down the track, it's actually, no, like, people will have incentives to run, mine themselves, and that's more decentralizing. And it's not just monetary profit. Like, it's not understanding praxeological definition of profit is a psychic profit. It's not monetary only. We're not just, people don't care just about numbers. I mean, yes, that's the most use case from an economics perspective. We can assume that, but Rothbard gives an example around, it's the owner of a business who gives his cousin, his cousin's friend a job or something like that. There's a element of, so psychic profit is the thing that actually matters. And so, like, I, as a, mining with Ocean or whatever, and you're filtering, or just a node runner running knots, filtering out spam, there's satisfaction in terms of, the filtering element, the profit of that in that regard, or mining and then kicking some other spam transactions out into the next block, not including them. Like, there's also a monetary element, but also a psychic profit point too. And Grass Mechanic talks about it as it's like, kind of, miners trying to, core assumes like they want to pick up pennies in front of a steamroller type stuff. And it's like, no, not necessarily. And I think it's just we're needing more to highlight the long-term economic elements, which I think are so important in terms of ensuring the quality of money is maintained. And I know, and that's the kind of missing link where I think it's ignoring a vacuum. They go the dev mindset of like, X, yes, cat and mouse, get to this endpoint, and that's not going to be great. And they compare that end state to the current state, where it's like, well, no, in those steps, you're making it harder. And then what is also the signal? So getting people to leave and go elsewhere. Well, they also don't factor in a graffiti analogy where think about like it's a monetary network, just like a train or transport network. And say we're like Grand Central Station or wherever it is, and you got the whole subway. And the subway there, and the whole point is to go from A to B, transport wise. And that's all the monetary, the purpose of that network, that's transport network. And then, okay, well, hang on. We've got this there's this side wall, this kind of where graffiti can go. And instead of going, well, because some people do graffiti and it's like on the train, instead of like putting in policy measures or whatever it takes to reduce their ability to graffiti or slow down trains or whatever it is, you go, well, hang on, we can make it, there's a graffiti wall we can give them where they can go and do graffiti. And then in the hopes of instead of getting in the way and slowing down the network elsewhere, they can come in and just do their graffiti there. But it's like, okay, well, you're then also incentivizing maybe more graffiti guys to come globally. Like it's not just a train network locally. It's like, hey, signal to all the graffiti artists in the world, you get hassles from everywhere else. But then this section lasts forever. It's not, you don't have less risk. Come over here and we're going to make that wall 100,000 times bigger or whatever. Going to opportunity increase. It's like, no, it should be, that's a signal on the quality of it as well. And yeah, the Phil Baggas, the Baggas article around the quality of money really goes into a lot of it. The economic angle has historically been around like the quantity theory of money, where an increase in the quantity obviously has an impact, but it does. He talks about and dives into more about the quality of money. So like the signal, even if no changes happen on Bitcoin, so like by analogy, the state signals, well, we're going to increase like quantitative easing. They just talk about it or whatever. That can send a signal to the market that the quality of money is in the US dollar is going to go down. And so from a core perspective, which I don't think they have any understanding about, is that the signal that they can send as well can have a massive impact on if a Bitcoin is money, then the quality of the network and who comes and who doesn't, and what is maintained and what isn't. And like with the VC money you're inviting in, and that's potentially corrupting as well. So,
yeah, and there's a bigger impact than any, like the current price drop here may or may have something to do with people getting cold feet because they're afraid of this whole core 30 being implemented and all this debates going on. Like, of course it has an impact. The thing I hope will happen is that everyone's happy that this conflict is happening, because it means Bitcoin works. Like if Bitcoiners were complacent and didn't react to stuff, that would mean Bitcoin isn't working to me. Like that would be way much more of a red flag than there being a conflict. Well, like we should be in constant conflict, or rather in constant argument, to make a Hoppian leap here. We should be in constant argumentation. We should never have an actual armed conflict. We should resolve all the conflicts through communications, which is what we're trying to do here. So shall we get into the gist of like the proposed forks, like what they are and what the core arguments, pun intended, for them are?
Yeah.
Or rather the NOTs arguments. Why, in your mind, why should people run NOTs? Why should people be pro BIP 110, and why should they be pro the cat? If that's your stance, like or the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why run NOTs? To me, it's like from a policy level, from a supporting those, it's like it's the Bitcoin is monetary only angle. I'd say Luke's key thing there is choice. It's like choice to the node runners, like not taking away choice. I'd probably be more inclined to have the default settings for that should be the monetary only angle, over like a lot harsher around, the dials per se you can change to like mitigate a lot of the different data types. And so from my perspective, it's like, why not? It's sending a signal, but also a practical perspective of like, what can you do individually and to support Bitcoin as monetary only, like improve its quality. And whilst it might be folks consider that not much, but like if everyone, I do it for the sake of it's the right thing to do from my perspective, where I'm not adding to the trash. I'm trying everything I can to mitigate and filter, all else being equal, like it is harder to propagate across the network than it otherwise would be. And then then there's the consequence of, this is the debate we have over several years, but it's kind of shifted because it was always, you can't do anything about it, but it's ignoring that it's all about rate mitigation. It's about rate limiting. It's about mitigation. It's not about this nirvana fallacy of you can eliminate spam, where that's not necessarily the goal. And so they was attacking this straw man, but that's kind of faded that in discussion because the existence of the cat, which Claire Ostromore has Nim has come out with, and the fascinating thing is this is an easy way to summarize this. I think is backwards looking, and then you've got BIP 110 that is Danthemom that's forward looking per se, but with the cat, it talks about for want of a better word, so using the ordinals. And a variety of the non-monetary data kind of protocols, it's taken them for their word. They suggest that they're flagging, signaling this is non-monetary data. We've heard from Casey that he, ordinals creator, admits it's nothing to do with Bitcoin, the asset itself. So my book, it's non-monetary, it's spam. Regardless if there's a valid transaction or not, we can go down that rabbit hole of the trope is valid transaction is valid transaction. And, we talk about historically the inflation bug, the over 2010 overflow piece, where a lot of these tropes that people push back on have already on their own terms they're finding a contradiction with what they currently support with what's already happened, but they're just not aware of it. But ultimately the cat, I think one is often when I've been discussing this with others, it's a bit of their flawed premise. So those that have they talk about confiscation, for want of a better word, or freezing, or any of those. That it's one, it's based on that they actually have ownership of it, which they don't. But interesting trope is where it's pushing. So those who are NFTs, ordinals, and they're very fearful of the cat. It's okay. Essentially, I'm where's your art? You love showcasing your art, right? Where is that? And often pushing them for that. A few people have provided that or have essentially provided it. And it's okay, well now, from a cat perspective, it identifies via their own index what they consider non-monetary, dick butts and all that jazz. It's flagged as non-monetary. And so it can capture that. And then using those, not heuristics, but kind of rules of sorts that they're abiding by, can identify, well, these are non-monetary transactions. So it's those transactions that are under 1,000 sats. So essentially 86 cents Australian or whatever currently. But the monetary, the sats piece is just the fact it's not the fact that it's low in value. From my perspective, quote dust, yes, that 86 cents or the 1,000 sats, that if Bitcoin long term, 10x's, or to $100, or what is it, 116 times to $100, Bitcoin would have to be $10 million a coin. So those things can become value long term, but it's more the fact that it's overtly, objectively, and we can determine it's spam, and so it shouldn't be there. And so if you can quote unquote, I'd say the best example is repudiate it. Kind of like the concept of public debt and private debt. Rothbard talks about the national debt and public debt and repudiating it. And the public debt is not the same as private debt. They should not be treated the same way. If, and this is by analogy, so if the Soviet Union racks up all this public debt, or the United States racks up all this public debt, it's much clearer in the Soviet Union case. It's this dictator makes up all this public debt, and then they get overthrown, or the populace revolts. Should the populace still be hamstrung by that public debt? No. And so it's repudiate it. And
I never consented to it. Like,
no,
they never
there's no
consented.
consent. And even like the United States, there's no consent to the state. There's no contract with the state. They change the rules amongst the game and all that. But even then, the United States has repudiated the national debt three times. They've ended central banking 3 times. But there's a few examples, so once or twice Rothbard talks about in repudiating the public debt there. And so by analogy, there's a distinction there. But most people will be like, well, no, it should be treated the same. You can't do that. But when you understand more in depth, you understand, well, no, there is a clear principle here and you can, and it has happened. That was what the most justifiable approach. The same thing with Bitcoin and the cat, and understanding what is monetary, what isn't, and what should be maintained or what should be removed. There is a potential signal, and that people talk about like, is that a slippery slope of, well, OFAC compliance, like you putting in place the tools for others to get on board. And it's like, well, no, not because it's like, if you understand 1 + 1 = 2, what's monetary and isn't, you have that whole rich Austrian economics understanding of economics background. It's clear cut. It's definitive. You can argue like, yes, 1 + 1 is 2 or not. But if you don't have that understanding, it becomes, yes, it can feel like willy-nilly, and it's not deductive and axiomatic and a priori. It's a little like, empirical. It's like hypothetical. Like, then that might feel like a slippery slope. And that's why you have that fear. And so there's very much a pattern I've seen of those who have done the work, understand what Austrian economics is and praxeology and the basics, can understand, well, we are being definitive here. We do understand it's as well. Again, it's on their own terms. And so, yes, you want repudiating that, and it's justifiable. I don't think it's calling it confiscation is an accurate use of term. I think that is built on a flawed premise of accepting IP and you can own images and whatnot, which is incorrect. But yeah, there's that angle to it, which I think is it's a challenge.
Let me offer you my perspective and see what you think about it. Let's dissect this. Yeah, the thing is, the false notion that Bitcoin is backed by digital energy is what's behind a lot of this, and that code is law. Like, what constitutes a valid transaction or not is ultimately up to the network. And we can tolerate a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean we approve of it. And there's a great South Park episode called The Death Camp of Tolerance, where they point out the difference between tolerance and approval. Just because you tolerate something doesn't mean that you agree with it or approve of it or think it's courageous or whatever. So even the threat of this fork happening has reduced the amount of spam. And I love that. Like, it's pointing out so many things about this. It's pointing out that the network decides, like, and we'll probably never get a consensus around this fork. I can buy that argument, or I shouldn't say that, but we'll see what happens. But even if there isn't consensus around it, the fact that it's on the table and the fact that there might be consensus around it should make all the spammers rethink their business models, because all of a sudden this guarantee that this will be here forever simply isn't there anymore. So their whole forever thing is dependent on what node runners at the end of the day what kind of software they choose to run. So and this is the beauty of the system. It was always the beauty of the system. It's just that it's so misinterpreted since it's been, the proof of work is being hailed as the big thing that makes Bitcoin work. But proof of work is just one small part of a much larger machine that at the end of the day runs on consensus and what an agreement on a fixed set of rules, what you and I decide that Bitcoin is. I just the fact that the cat is on the table and points that out is very beautiful to me.
Yeah. And you're right. It's that consensus. So like it's the consistency for those that are maybe like hesitant to support. Yeah, you point out like on their own terms. Okay, it's like, well, talking about like a confiscation of sorts, or like freezing assets, and like, well, yeah, then you ask about the inflation bug in like 2010, like the overflow where there were coins that essentially confiscated, and there's really a question of like press people that have that mindset, like, so you were against that. The 86 billion or whatever it was that were the 2 transactions, the UTXOs that had that amount in there, like based on what? Like, why would you object to that? Which you object to that, and fix that and fork to ensure that Bitcoin doesn't have, 186 billion or whatever Bitcoin. What's that based on? And the answer that I would always not get, like they just mental block for whatever reason, or don't understand like the premise of the question. The answer is like, the reason we know that is not great, negative, shouldn't be done on their own terms of you think Bitcoin is money is because, you've got the whole field of economics and knowledge that indicates why inflation is bad and why increasing the money supply is detrimental, unnecessary, and isn't needed. And so if you don't like that's the key thing to draw to. And then that same answer of why we've hard forked or fixed that was like consensus accepted then, but also it's based on what? It's based on that sound understanding of economics and, prior knowledge regarding that. And so the same can be applied, those same principles can be applied to spam and the monetary or the non-monetary stuff that is there. And that's why there's a consistency there for those that I think support getting rid of that stuff. And for me, it's reduce what helps improve Bitcoin's quality as money, and what in essence. And so there's the cat, which I think is amusing as well, because out of that you see Greg Max or whatever talking about like to the mailing list around banning those that are proposing confiscation, quote unquote, confiscating coins. But then you have Peter Willey, Blockstream already talking about with quantum coins, updating the algorithm to do that. And so like consistency doesn't exist. And for actually, it's funny, like those coins shouldn't be changed and actually confiscated or stolen or like changed. From like Conrad Graff in his book, Bitcoin's Ownable, like it's chapter 4, it talks about brain wallet scanning, like the elements of trespass and theft, and talks and dives into that. And there's a very solid scenario around like, well, those who were white hat, say this is the example of like that brain wallet, like scanning to the quantum threat. Well, if you've got that quantum ability, is it like there's white hat, there's black hat, there's gray hat, there's a variety of things you can kind of go through and talk about. But that's again just another key of them missing the economic element, and that's definitely a concern. So I mean that's the cat, and then more forward looking is like BIP 110, which is I guess like a temporary limit. It's got a temporary limit on the size of data fields at the consensus level. So it's kind of in order to correct distorted incentives caused by standardizing support for arbitrary data, and then refocuses priorities on improving Bitcoin as money. So it's like temporary protection, limits on data storage, and preserves monetary use, and refocuses on Bitcoin. It kind of bore out of a threat around like emergency threat from perspective of CSAM type stuff, but then more forward looking around as like an activation point in 9 months. There's minor potentially like wanting miners to fork across, where it's like a miner activated soft fork, which hopefully they activate before then, but if not, then it's UASF. But that gets kind of into the technical weeds. But I think that's definitely more forward-looking. And it's what if it improves Bitcoin's quality as money, sends the right signal, I'm all for that. But I can understand the concerns some folks might have around the quote-unquote confiscation type things where, again, if you don't have that, there's no slippery slope. Like 1 + 1 = 2. We can understand what is monetary properties, what are sound monetary properties, what improves and what doesn't improve Bitcoin's quality as money. There's no chance like OFAC compliance stuff. Bitcoin has reacted to Mara Mining, who did that several years ago and was sent packing and stopped them. It was because the social layer, and really the only real that layer reacted in the way it should. And pushed overtly, like resulting in them stopping that. And so the challenge is they haven't continued, like the same reaction hasn't happened to spam and non-monetary data, ordinals, the scams there. Partly, I think you have to look at not just the technical side, but the social side. And so like devs are operating in a vacuum, VCs, Brink, and others, which, this comes into the conspiratorial side, but there's definitely self-interest there. No strings doesn't mean no strings.
If you want to find local Bitcoin communities, other Bitcoiners, Bitcoin merchants, and Bitcoin events in your area, there's no better way to do that than through the Orange Pill app. Wait a minute. It's not the Orange Pill app anymore. It's Club Orange. Club Orange is an Omni app that includes a lot of features, including a list of events, a wallet where you can send and receive sats over the Lightning Network. You can even geo-sap areas, so you can send sats to a whole bunch of people in one single area. You can also tap sap while you're chatting to someone, which is a new feature that I don't believe exists anywhere else. Overall, a fantastic app for connecting Bitcoiners all around the world. So go to cluborange.org and sign up today. You won't regret it. It's not just a gay dating app. It's everything else too. You can use it for... forget about that. Go and sign up. cluborange.org. If you want to really secure your Bitcoin, you should check out the Bitcoin Advisor. They have never lost a single sat, and they take care of your stack together with you. They can't use your stack. That's impossible. But they can help you with inheritance planning. They can help you hodl the Bitcoin long term. So go to thebitcoinadvisor.com to find out more. And brush your teeth. I'd say to the cat thing, just to comment on that one thing, like what constitutes a valid transaction or not was never, it was always up to the network what that was. So like this is the thing you have to keep in mind because and I love that you went back to Conrad Graf, because are Bitcoins ownable? Because it all ties back to that. Like information is not ownable, and consensus in a distributed network is not something that is up to you. It is up to the network. It is up to the network what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin wants to do. And use it at your own peril. That is true for hodlers as well as spammers. You decide how much trust you want to put in the ability of Bitcoiners to act as Bitcoiners, if you will, to protect the network. I mean, it's something for everyone, and for everyone to consider. And this is the irony of it all, is that the same mechanism that makes the spammers confident is the thing that makes hodlers less confident, and vice versa. If the hodlers can be confident that the network will throw out the spammers, then the spammers will feel less confident that their shit will last forever. So there's a dynamic here, and this is how Bitcoin actually works, regardless of what any technical person says, because at the end of the day, it's all about people choosing what software to run. And sure, right now it looks like an overwhelming amount of people choose to just upgrade without asking questions. And that may or may not be the case in the future, but there's no 100% certainty here. That's sort of the point.
The challenge is where they annoyingly, like you're building your effort, like pointing out the reality of what money is, what Bitcoin is, what spam is, and educating in that sense of like economic literacy and making those connections for people, and you're building consensus in a sense. But some of the chief spam enablers I've had discussions over time, like just can't get their head through like that you don't have consensus or whatever. It's like, yeah, well aware, but like it's if understanding that I think Bitcoin is money and Bitcoiners, if you ask them, and I've done the polls where it's, small sample size, but essentially, is Bitcoin money or a database? And like, it's like 80, 90%, like, no, it's money. And so like, that is what is accepted. And it's like, okay, well, these are the consequences that it'd be different if you're trying to push shit up a hill, so to speak, where you're going to network and then something is completely anathema to it, and people disagree completely, and you're trying to change all that. It's like, no. From our perspective, almost everyone agrees it's money. They pay lip service to its money. Even bad actors, or those who are economically literate, understand the debate can't go on. They need to say it is, otherwise they get immediately dismissed, and no one gives a shit about their opinion, because it's that ignorant and counter to what Bitcoin is. It doesn't deserve a foot or an element of respect. So that's the tactic I saw that has changed from the core side, where instead of it's data, who cares if you're dick butt's a dick butt, like, it's not up to me. First, like, no, they've lent heavily into, yes, it is money, like Adam Back merch, yes, it is. And then you question, okay, we'll do a bit better than that, please. Can you? And you get no, you don't. Or there's this ignoring, and your head in the sand type stuff, where demonstrated preference, like a concept where you demonstrate your preference through action. And so, no, they don't care about its money. Like they don't. And either it's that or it's that, assuming good faith, it's their economic literacy. But then they don't ask the question around what is spam. Like if that was actually true, where I see with merch and stuff where, they took their best faith is the op return and would put in this little box and like, okay, there's a bad actor here, but you want to give them an easier place to be a bad actor. It's like, well, no, you wouldn't say what is spam. And like, you wouldn't, like Peter Todd throwing that out, to debates with Jimmy Song and stuff. Like that's the common narrative where they don't even really think it is. Okay, then there's a push of like, well, it's not my role to deal with that type stuff. And it's like, no, it is. Like if the network, any network is getting DDoSed by spam, like, and you should have an incentive to improve that quality or stop it and filter it out. And by whatever means necessary, that, the trade-offs make sense. And I don't think there needs to be a trade-off per se, like for allowing monetary data, non-monetary data on a monetary network. Like, no, go away.
Yeah. I mean, I had the pleasure of standing side by side with Jimmy and debating Peter Todd on the demurrage and tail emissions crap in Prague. And I think his ideas are just so anti-Bitcoin ethos. It's just baffling to me that this guy has been here for that long time, because as you said about mining before, there are plenty of incentives to mine that aren't dependent on a block reward or even a block subsidy or anything like that. I mean, right now I'm mining while heating my home, but heating my home is the primary use case for that thing that 21 Energy gave me. Beautiful thing, by the way. Thank you very much, 21 Energy, for giving me the Often 2 home mining, home warming thing. But my primary use case is just not being shit cold in here, because I live in the Mediterranean. Houses aren't insulated. Like it's super cold. So it's great for that. And the Bitcoin mining part of it is a bonus side effect. And the thing is, the Bitcoin network is, the security in it is like orders of magnitude too big. And the difficulty adjustment works both ways. People think the hash rate can only go up, and if it goes down a bit, that's disastrous. But it isn't. It takes 2 weeks and then it adjusts and it's fine. Like, this is not a concern.
Sorry to jump in, but like, I know the strategic Bitcoin reserve, like SBR, like whether that ships out or not, from my perspective, it's those who even wanted it, like, shouldn't. And so on this point, it's like, why would you want the separation of money and state? It's like, no, you want the state to be invested in Bitcoin or hold or own Bitcoin, where they're unjustifiable, but it's regardless. But then it's the corrupting factor of, well, okay, if there's you're using taxpayer the taxpayer funds or an unlimited potential amount of funds to mine Bitcoin, and so like they can then have incentives to subsidize. And what happens is that it crowds out the real Bitcoin owners and private plebs. And so it's like, instead of, say, the difficulty, the halving happens, or instead of those certain types, so miners going offline and hash rate enabling, well, for those who are more efficient, they can just keep mining. And so the state is getting rewards that they shouldn't, or then mining companies would get, who are private owners. And then instead of that is a centralizing factor. So that
what happens is Mara, basically. Marathon mining. Like it's a flaw in the fiat system that allows that to be. If Bitcoin miners were Bitcoiners, they would value the Satoshi more than the dollar, and they wouldn't but the flaw in the fiat system is that they can get these artificially low interest rates because of fucking money manipulation, which is the problem we're trying to solve. Like, so it's so ironic.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, I don't think a lot of Bitcoiners kind of understand that, or those who are supporting SBR like clearly don't. Like, in terms of, there's a one step of, okay, allowing the state to hold or own Bitcoin, and then the next step is a nation state mining. And I just against that, in the same vein that, okay, to what extent that they're still mining and those rewards are going to the state when they should be going to others. And yeah, absolutely right. Like, business cycles, right? We have the central banks create, the create business cycles. So like artificial interest rates, spurs consumption or malinvestment. And there's a still element of maybe that those funds they don't go everywhere evenly. So the Cantillon effect, but maybe that goes to Bitcoin mining. And so like a bubble or not, or whatever it is. But there's absolutely a potential impact on Bitcoin inadvertently through still the fiat system. So it's like something that I think gets overlooked. But the last thing I want to do as a state to take a foot in the door in that direction is like, for example, like Ross Ulbricht getting like pardoned or whatnot. It's like, well, he should all get all his money, his Bitcoin back. Like that's the only justifiable piece, not folks talking about him getting a strategic, using the state has that and uses strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's like, well, no, you've essentially stolen his stuff and the drug war, like whatever it is.
No, and the fact that most of the Bitcoins were mined the first 4 years, like the halving cycle, is beautiful, because that's what prevents the state from now capturing this thing. If the rewards were as big, it was 50 new Bitcoins every 10 minutes forever, like the Peter Todd thing, the tail emissions, that would enable the state to print money to take over the network in the long run. Like they probably can print money to take over all mining now, but they can't stop Bitcoin at this point because the fact that most of the coins have already been mined, and it's a beautiful thing. So no, it's and this whole notion of pandering to politicians, I find it revolting on every single, like, Bitcoin is for enemies, yes, but that doesn't mean I like my enemies. I don't want my enemies to have Bitcoin. I don't want them to have any money. Everyone's missing that from their equation. Why would you want the state to have Bitcoin? Are you fucking mad? Like, fortunately, not your keys, not your coins applies to states too. So it's some guy at Coinbase that actually owns the Bitcoin and not the state. And some guy at Coinbase owns all of MicroStrategy's Bitcoins too.
Yep.
And this is the risk, your keys, your coins, right?
Again, it's a problem. This is the thing. The problem that Bitcoin solved, like, so not needing trusted third parties, like financial institutions. So if you don't have the private keys, you don't have effective control. You don't essentially, quote unquote, own that Bitcoin. So like ETFs and all that. And this is a threat of fiduciary media, where it's a trusted third parties. Is essentially that you're reintroducing the problem that Bitcoin solved, and the threat that, people talk about paper Bitcoin, or paper gold, right? Like, essentially fractional reserve banking, how the state had sound money of enough and got corrupted. And then the threat is, like, one Bitcoin will be one Bitcoin, but it's like if the market starts treating the ETFs and whatever else and others as Bitcoin itself, there's a risk there where then, yes, like there's an impact on all else being equal. There's more funds that are more Bitcoin out there than there actually is, although there isn't, but it's being treated by others as if it is, right? So, and there's a meme I saw recently where it's kind of like 2028, like, looking at the screen, and it's like, what the hell, where like the current on-chain number of Bitcoin in ETF and exchanges is like more than 21 million or whatever. And just like, okay, at that point though, at least there's an element of a run on the, like there used to be a run on the banks, right? Where, okay, do you actually have my savings in my savings deposit, my checking account? I'm going to go to the bank, I get out my money before anyone else does. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, how much is there? Like, who actually has Bitcoin? Who's just got it on paper? And like we see that like already with FTX, where that happened several years back, right? Like where that suppressed the price for a bull run because they had extensive amounts of billions that they weren't actually selling, didn't actually have or weren't buying, but were representing as. So it's like that's one of the biggest threats to Bitcoin is we've got to have this ethos of like, you don't have Bitcoin if you don't have the private keys. Like at best you have a money certificate. Like it's a money substitutes. It's like a money certificate, which is 1-to-1, which is like you claim it and you get it. The worst is fiduciary media, where you claim it and it's not backed and you don't actually have it. You don't get it, which is, yeah.
No, I totally agree. This is true for all custodial wallets, basically, and especially all custodial Lightning wallets. It's super easy to do fractional reserve banking on custodial Lightning, but the beauty is it's still more limited than it was on gold. Like on gold, you could do it forever because there was no way for people to verify how much gold there actually was. But with Bitcoin, people can and do check that all the time. So they can verify that there aren't more than 21 million. So paper Bitcoins, I think they're going to exist for a long time, or if not forever. But it's way harder. You need a bigger fraction than in regular fraction. Would you agree to that?
So the last part, you need a bigger fraction.
Yeah, than you did back in the days of fractional reserve banking.
Do you mean to keep it safe per se? So there's no
safe for the bad actor.
I agree that there's like the digital element where verifying that, like, I know there's, Peter Schiff getting, I think, on stage a gold brick, and it's like it's Chinese tungsten underneath there or whatever it is, like painted over. Like, how do you verify? Like, and then Bitcoin provides that crypto verification of sorts where that, don't trust, verify. There's a reason for that. So cryptographically we can verify. And then with Lightning, like Lightning is being treated as a perfect money substitute. So the market considers Bitcoin, like there's Bitcoin units and then there's Lightning units, but they're being treated as a perfect money substitute, is like the equivalent, essentially the equivalent. Now, Liquid, so LBTC, isn't treated like one-to-one, like as a perfect money substitute, because there's that reintroduction of trust, right? Yeah, there's a federation and, but like, okay, to what extent? But it wouldn't be not as liquid. So essentially, it's not being treated as one-to-one. And so I think interesting long-term is like if Lightning were to reduce its quality as a money substitute, where it's like essentially one-to-one, it's like a money certificate essentially. But then if there's, I don't know particularly the technicals, but casual, there's some things where there's potentially like within Lightning or more shitcoins on Lightning or reducing the quality in that way, or if there was become like fiduciary media of sorts within Lightning for different platforms that are things are being represented as you have a money certificate and you don't actually, then there's a risk. Like, and the further away that is from the main Bitcoin, like on chain, I think the better. But yeah, it's like, I think that's why we need to be so overtly clear in what the problem is and what it is, like how money solves that and how Bitcoin solves it. And if you don't understand, like if it's like, it's in the white paper, it's a call out from Satoshi, it's the clear cut innovation that's enabled. If you just paper over that or minimize that, I think for like variety of reasons, then that's a real threat and attack vector and risk. And again, coming back to the consensus layer, consensus from understanding of, it's like Bitcoiners need to be able to maintain that. And part of the core is like, yes, as we grow masses improve, and like the cyberpunks, those who are early adopters, more keenly attuned to then those that are down the track. The UX is so easy. You don't need to know anything. You don't need to read, basic stuff to understand like, well, that's just what it is. Like, I don't need to, it's just so common, and here's a scanner. Well, I don't need to understand monetary stuff or whatever. It just works. As we slowly progress to that point, ideally, it's like the value prop of Bitcoin being hard to change is a positive. The challenge is that those that have the most sway, not living up to the end of the bargain per se, or through economic illiteracy, and whether that's just like devs who were OGs have money has gone up and like have checked out and on a beach enjoying it, but during their time, but then I feel a lot of like Nick Szabo, for instance, has poked their head up and gone, wait, what? What the F like is happening current state? You're trying to do what? And getting always forced to come back and try and right the ship. It's always up to the plebs. So it's like, one, they can be seen as the captains of the ship, the devs, which I feel like they are. But Mises has this quote where it's like, the consumers are king, the end user, the node runners are the king, where essentially it's like we decide what chain essentially is going to be, like what is money, what is the considered Bitcoin like long term. So it's better that they understand that or stop, I guess, making decisions around like that aren't improving Bitcoin's quality as money. But I know they think they are, but I don't.
So what would you say to those that think this problem solves itself, that the spammers will price themselves out and that you can only fool people for that long, and after that there will be no more spam? I mean, people who say that this is a temporary problem, basically.
Yeah, I try and get like at what point, like how, like get them on record. I often say is like when, but it's often they talk about fees, like, oh, it's like as if high fees, mattered, and like those times have gone where there's a big spike.
As if it's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant. Like I don't care about high fees per se. Like if it's for monetary use, like if it's from as a result of that, and obviously medium exchange, the lower transactional cost per se, the better, all else being equal. But it's like, why is that? Is it because of use? Because of on-chain transactions? Like, yes, Lightning exists to help scale and is being treated as a monetary substitute, like a perfect money substitute. So be it. But pricing yourself out is like, I think you could they're playing a different game. Like, and this is a thing that a lot of people get where. And I've done the polls. It's like, look, if we're back in those days when the fees were high, it's like asking Bitcoiners, no runners, have you held back from making transactions that you otherwise would have? Because you are potentially paying 2 to 200 times more than you otherwise would. Has that had an impact on your sending transactions using Bitcoin? And the answer is like 85% yes. And it's like, well, yeah, why would I feel, if I have to compete with junk and dick butts and non-monetary stuff, I'm not going to send that transaction unless I really need to. I'm going to, consolidate my UTXOs to down the track when it dies down or whatever, attempt to try and get a lesser fee. But the point is, they are crowding it out. And why would you not want to increase the cost or try and mitigate those bad actors, those ignorant actors, or whoever it is from using Bitcoin and crowding out real Bitcoiners? And it is that analogy of like Bitcoin's a chess club because they're monetary only. And essentially, you have checkers players in there, right, who are trying to spruik checkers in the chess club. And it's like some of these spam enablers are like, oh, I just let him go, let him chat, let him like get on a megaphone, have a dick butt, party, and in the chess club. And it's like, well, hang on, no, like why? If we've got to check, like they're breaking the rules, but even if they've found a loophole, we've got to close that loophole and kick them out, because what's going to happen to the quality of long term of the chess club if you've got checkers players in there ruining, being loud, obnoxious, and whatever it is? And the answer isn't, well, make it a games club. It's like, no, it's a chess club, and it's so like, and the theory behind this. So Conrad Graff has another article is around block size that it dived into, but it talks about consensus. It's like a public code. It's like a public club, but code enhanced governance. So not like law, but it's like a chess club, a public club. Anyone can join. You do need to use your private property to have a say. So like running a node, mining, and engaging in that way. But part of the club, there's the rules or the consensus piece to it. And so it's like, all right, well, what are the rules or you want to abide by here? And everyone, bad actors included, often concede it's money. So that's what we need to, we've got a whole rich field of knowledge which can help inform those, what those rules should be. And then it's elements of like, yes, trying to convince others with the BIP 10, 110, the cat, or whatever it is, when we don't necessarily have, it's like the chess club board has gone AWOL a little bit. And so it's like, all right, as chess players, we need to, yes, run knots, which is like almost a different client, obviously, same, still part of Bitcoin, because that board isn't chess itself. Like if that chess club goes down per se, it's not, there's still chess clubs other chess clubs out there. But the thing with Bitcoin, there is only that one monetary network that is like, that's the purpose of money. It's competing those commodities, rivalrous digital commodities, but Bitcoin is, but other commodities competing, Bitcoin competing against all other monetary economic goods. And it's becoming, I think, the most saleable given its what it is and the benefits of that. So like often I can be seen as, shitting on core and the current piece, but there's no, compared to what, like still the fact that Bitcoin is there, it's like not going into fiat. Like, are you crazy? Like, given what's coming, all the net negatives of gold still, compared to. So this is a challenge we're faced with, where we need to, look to right the ship, as consumers, as the kings, as the no runners, loudly state what we support, and you do that by action. And yeah, it's running knots. It's BIP. It's running. It's supporting the cat. Theoretically or practically, it's supporting BIP 110 if needed, and then mining with Ocean or using Datum, using your own, putting your own blocks, and just decentralizing mining, which is another big threat attack vector.
Absolutely, that's a soundbite right there, I think. So I love the chess analogy, because I think there are many. The game of chess is similar to Bitcoin in very many ways. Like the latest change to the chess rules is en passant, which is like 1100 years old or something. And this is it's very similar to chess in that sense that chess is also just an agreement on a fixed set of rules, and the reason we agree on those rules is because then we can have this wonderful game where we can act together in ways that we like. The Bitcoin is exactly the same. We can act as if we own this money when it's money was never anything but information, and Bitcoin sort of pointed it out. And like you say with the checkers thing, if all of a sudden started adding a policy that checkers pieces are now allowed on chessboards, what would happen is that they'd lose a certain amount of players, and players would go somewhere else to play chess. That's perfectly analogous with core and knots and what's going on in Bitcoin. Like, you can fiddle around to a certain extent, but you will find out. The more you fuck around, the more you find out. Is basically what it is. No, so I think chess is very analogous to Bitcoin in many ways. And when done properly, and when we all have consensus around this fixed set of rules, we get something beautiful. And also the chessboard and the pieces, just like the nodes, the software, the miners, the hardware, they're just tools to help us intellectualize things. Like, it's not really a node and a miner is just a fancy abacus that helps us do the calculation. But at the end of the day, it's all in our heads. It's all us expressing appreciation to one another through beautiful mathematics that makes it harder to cheat the system than to follow the rules, right? So there's so much to that, and like when you have that rich philosophical foundation when thinking about these things, I think it's much easier to understand what it is and what it isn't. It's also to understand that it's not perfect. It could never be perfect, arguably, because human beings are flawed. It's sort of good enough to last forever, and that's all it always needed to be, because that makes it better than fiat and makes it better than gold. So yeah, and I personally think we'll survive the spam attacks. We'll survive the whatever attacks. We'll survive them because we'll stay vigilant. We'll win some battles and lose some, but in the long run, we will win. Because if you don't think that, then we definitely won't win. Like there's Pascal's wager of optimism, so to speak. Like, if you don't believe this will work, then there's no chance it will. Like, you have to be positive, and you have to be optimistic and hopeful when looking at it, because otherwise, what the fuck are you doing? Like, and rage quit then.
That's it. And it's like not optimistic, our understanding of economics, but like Mises talks about like optimistic fatalism being a massive threat, where it's just like understanding that, and this is what everything is good for Bitcoin type trope kind of leans into, where it's like a kind of a inoculating, okay, there's, spam's happening, but hey, and often the case is like, well, I'm a spam enabler. I've got buddies who are doing it. I'm like kind of posting this trope to like, don't worry about it. It's just going to sort itself out. Let quote unquote, in brackets, in my point, like, let us scam in peace, or let my friends scam in peace, in a way. It's like, no. Where is the viral, visceral reaction of Bitcoiners? Where there used to be, like, whereas like, and nothing toxic about it in my book. It's just passionately principled understanding. Like, no, I'm a Bitcoiner. Like, the reason why I'm a maximalist is because I understand the simple fact that, yeah, Bitcoin is competing against all other commodities, and it's the best given its monetary properties. And then as that competition happens, it's going to be, you tend towards that one thing, which is one commodity, which is money, the most saleable good in society. And so if you are going to be doing anything to reduce that quality, like I'm going to arc up about it. I've got, there's life savings, like there's a Swan article back in the day about you dipping your toe in and then you're knee deep and now like you're snorkeling in debt. Like, so I think the plebs have that conviction, and that's through economic literacy and like the Bitcoin standard approach, where you get that, where a lot of the quote unquote, the devs, I think it is being behind the scenes, them knowing, to say, potential fragility that the system has, given various, like Matt Corallo with like the inflation bug in like 2018 or whatever, like that guy to get picked up by some Bcash dev or whatever to indicate like that's a risk there. And it's like if you're putting your life savings plus into that stuff and you see those firsthand what others are doing, it's hard to do. And for a lot of them, like, yeah, there's public things of Peter Todd selling his Bitcoin and like selling it 50% of it or whatever, like publicly in like 2012 or whatever. And when you understand that, it's like lacking that conviction, just getting paid and whatnot. It's like, well, is that partly why he's say bitter and hanging around, or it's the fact that he's taking Solana, posting like getting $5,000 like from a Solana to do a Solana ad. It's like zero integrity, and like how he's admitted he doesn't have any significant assets. So it's like they don't have the skin in the game as much as
or he's Satoshi and this is just the perfect alibi.
Well, I think the Satoshi, I think, and this is like, I see Hal Finney as well. It's like, it's the clearest distinction I have why Hal wasn't Satoshi is so Hal supporting like fractional reserve banking and like talking about George Selgin, where Satoshi is like actively calling out fractional reserve banking and the business cycle being created, and also the element of fixed money supply. Like all that is the only reason. And you had cryptocurrencies before Bitcoin that like didn't work, but it's like, what was the difference? Like the incentive alignment, but also the fixed supply being a key differentiator there. And there's only one economic school of thought that gets you there, and that's the Austrian school. And so like coming back to the Venn diagram or whatever it is, like having someone who's both, that was Satoshi. He had the tech skills and he's the engineer, the dev, but also learnt the monetary element and why that was such important. And it's combining that together gave us the gift that is Bitcoin. And so the cause for concern is, as that's progressed, there's those who are openly, like literally got the $5 trillion asset. You got 5 people who can push code, and one of them is overtly like, no idea about what money is. I can't talk about Bitcoin from a monetary perspective. And it's just wild. And it's like, surely given the number of people out there that having Bitcoin thrown at them, they at least can understand some very basic stuff about it from a monetary perspective, because it's a requirement, because it's humanity's best chance at freedom money. Like, it boggles my mind that anyone can credibly get up there and say they're technical when they're operating on something that is money and they don't know anything about it. Like, this is wild. But yeah, that's where we're at. So like, even with that, it's like, yeah, it's a concern, but we got to leap into action, do the things that you can do individually, and pipe up where it matters. But yeah, it's still better than fiat and gold. So yeah, it's like speaking long term. So yes, we've got some work to do, but it's more of it's like we've got to. So it's either us, the plebs, doing the technical work, like getting skilled up, and that should happen regardless. But some way it's also the current dev crop need to learn some basic economics. And if you're reading crypto economics or whatever other junk there is getting pushed as that isn't Austrian, as in praxeological, then yeah, you're wasting your time. So yeah, we need to read Knut's book and others. Simple as that.
Yeah. Amen to that. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. We've been going for 2 hours now, so maybe it's time to wrap this up. Is there anywhere where we haven't gone yet? There's like stuff you wanted to talk about that you feel you were left out?
Not like related to all this stuff. I think kind of covered all. I mean, there is like maybe future podcasts talking about there's like a private law society.
Yeah. I love that. The whole dichotomy between lawful and legal. We never went there, but yeah, that's a big chapter.
But it is an interesting element of, so there's actually some guys, so you like BISC, like decentralized exchange using Bitcoin as a platform. And then there's some gents who've taken, so like there's a 2 of 2 escrow. So the multi-sig approach that has, but it's the private law society. So these guys out in Brazil have essentially done that, doing that for contracts. So it's like trying to, instead of using the state for contracts, it's using and, relying on force. It's essentially, well, we both agree, like there's a market using Bitcoin, like putting up collateral that, we want to use, we agree to this contract. They're attaching an agreement that they've like a contract to it, and then choosing from arbitraries where they currently exist or a market of that, a marketplace to choose that. And then it's like, okay, then they engage in that, and then post the transaction completing, it's a happy medium. They go about their lives. But if there's a dispute, you have dispute resolution that's baked into the system, just similar to BISCARs, like arbitration and mediation, if there's any trades that don't happen. And so it's like literally private law in action, not based on location or whatnot. And so potentially a wild, literal example of private law happening. But
I think I met these guys or something similar to them back in, like this is like 4 or 5 years ago at the Free Cities conference.
Yep.
There was a lot about that. Yeah. It's a pretty cool project. I mean, this is the whole thing. People say, let us spam in peace because they think spamming has something to do with the free market. No, spamming and scams are not a part of the free market. They're breach of contract, meaning they're criminal. So it's people get that completely wrong. They think because we're libertarian that we think that somehow it's okay to scam people, but it absolutely isn't. And the only thing we're saying is that it's up to the victim to solve the problem, and take responsibility. And there's a big difference there. But scams are not a part of the free market. They're a part of crime, which the state is too, by the way.
And this is talk about Eric Vors, who's like a kind of a constant behind this, but I think is just an embodiment of this like libertarian, libertine, even like David Friedman type anarcho-capitalist, where Rothbard talks about it's like spammers and scammers. Like it's like they talk about economic demand for like something, and it's like Rothbard's got a good piece, and he's talking about fractional reserve banking, which Eric Vors I believe supports as well. And it's like, oh, is that the quote unquote free market? It's like, no, we don't support a free market to scam. And the comment here is like Rothbard's asked about like, what about the argument that 100% reserves require government intervention? And he's like, well, I regard fractional reserve banking as an intervention in the free market, just as crime against person and property is an intervention. And they create a banking, it allows them the crime to be committed. But how do we address the needs of trade argument? So it's like those that say business has a demand for credit, what about that? Well, it's like, well, there are many things the market demanded on the market that are also crimes, like demand for killing redheads, he talks about. And there's certainly demand for government loot. Like, what's so great about market demand?
No. A demand for credit doesn't mean that you can just conjure up credit and pretend it's money. Yeah, it's super simple.
And you see some like core devs though talk about like, oh, there's demand, like economic demand for like NFTs and like the ordinals and like inscriptions and like the spam. And it's like, so what? Like is it a monetary, is it a monetary network? Is it monetary or not? Like, and so
there's a lot of demand for heroin too.
Right. And so like with Eric Vors, I think though the problem is that's his ethos, or like he thinks. And so, and often I think it's a rationalization for how, like, okay, how can I make money? I can do these bad things, but it's just a free market. Like, these plebs I'm dunking on, like I'm scamming, like, well, that's their choice. They have a choice to and like, as you rug pull them and you commit fraud, essentially, it's like, well, no, like we're not, it's like, and so part of it is the David Friedman style with the free bank is they kind of accepts a David Friedman kind of anarchism where there's no law, only people engaging in exchange and buying people out. So like if you've got a group who that wants to kill redheads, the redheads like have to buy them off if they value their hair. And it's like he thinks it's monstrous, and that kind of anarchism would indeed be chaos. And so like I think just, because there's demand for something doesn't mean it should be fulfilled. And that's, I think, the detachment where what's the premise in that? Like a lot of them, like the libertarians, I see it, or like the pro spammers, ordinals, NFT guys, Eric Vors. It's like, oh, it's free market, and it's like, based on what?
No,
and they don't have any idea what the free market is based on in terms of like contract and like, but also what type of contract? There's contract theory. And then there's there's a variety of that. It's not just making promises as a contract. So it's like Rothbard Ether's property title transfer contract theory, which is the only justifiable one, and you can deep dive into that. But they've got no idea that concept exists, and that's what the free market is based on, a contract, legitimate justifiable transactions. And so to them, it's just yes, A and B, we both agree. But from a fractional reserve perspective, A and B, I'm a depositor, I'm going to drop that money into the bank. They're going to treat it as as money and fractional reserve it. And then, but the thing is, there's the third party who the A and B agree, the bank and the depositor agree, sure, but then they go to the third party who believes that's backed by something, and part C doesn't agree, and D and E and F don't agree, and the same way, node, by analogy, the node runners don't agree. So the ordinals scammers and the ordinals buyer might agree, okay, sure, although they're trying to bank on screwing over the greater fool. And it's well, no, C and D and E and F and all node runners don't agree, and they're monetary only, and their property is being impacted. So it's the same thing. And that's the challenge of I think so much damage has been caused by just that one philosophical misunderstanding. I think if Eric is behind Citria, an investor, and there's Lop and all these guys, if they and in the devs, there's a lot of this, again, this economic literacy that if it was understood, I think they would realize risking killing the golden goose. Why would you do that? And if they have that asset themselves, they're reducing its quality. Why would you be actively doing that? So see, they don't have it, or they don't know. And yeah, it's either there's different ways to go about it, but yeah, it's that's the current challenge, I think.
So what do you think is more common for shitcoiners, ignorance or malice?
I think ignorance, but then there's some that overtly enjoy the malice, of it, and they revel in it, and yes, there's this highly degenerate element to it. If it's just gambling, and that seems like Eric gambling, Adam Back gambling, in terms of stocks. So he's always been a trader, this type of thing. It's not good enough to be just sound money, humanity's best chance of freedom money, separation of money and state. And they're trying to feel, it seems and I'm, psychologizing here, and, don't hold much weight to it. But what I see is an element of that. And, but it's, I think it's far rarer. If they knew the consequences, they'd be far less inclined to do it. But there can always be those who do know and do it anyway. But yeah, I guess it depends.
And I think even if you, so let me see how to frame this, because in a sense it's all ignorance, because people are malevolent or malicious because they don't understand what that's doing to their souls, according to Ayn Randian objectivism or whatever. I don't think you can actually, and this is of course opinion, but I think most people underestimate how much damage being a bad actor does to your soul, for lack of a better word. How much more satisfied you'd be with life if you chose to not scam people.
Yes.
Your word, the Scarface quote, sorry for continuing here, but all I have in this world is my word and my balls, and they don't break for no one. If everyone lived by that, we'd all be fine, because people put a discount on their integrity, and I think that's largely a product of fiat and fiat mindedness, this high time preference thinking. If everyone was totally low time preference, incentivized to be low time preference by Bitcoin if you want, then would get to that which I can do without I own type of mindset, and will be less materialistic, less short-term thinking, and less malicious, because that's a better life. That's a better way to live. It's period.
Yeah. And I think there's what I sometimes see as well is, which I try not to trigger, is there's a quote where it's there's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation. Contempt prior to investigation. So those, if I sometimes see it with the shitcoin as a scam, is if there's a lack of intellectual honesty, which raises a red flag, and a lack of curiosity, to me, it's you're almost spitting in the face of progression and like civilization. Like you nothing more, I think, like insulting or like worthy of contempt is that. But what I do see is people that often, sometimes revel in that ignorance, or they've got that contempt for whatever reason. So maybe it's like LDS, like Luke derangement syndrome, or whatever it is. There's like some things there for some devs. But if there's that contempt, prior investigation, or like sometimes like looking at Greg Maxwell or some of these, what can we do to explain some of their reactions to some of these things that are new, and the principles are there and it actually contradicts some of their old statements, but they've got contempt for whatever reason, and on that current piece of information. And so it's almost like it's either trying to get around that or mitigate that somehow or not trigger it. But yeah, it's that contempt which kind of keeps them in a state of ignorance, and hopefully like using memes or humor or I don't know is ways to get others to see through that. But otherwise, like sometimes it's hard to, when someone's paycheck, what's the phrase where like they're getting paid to look other
Upton
ways.
Sinclair, yeah. It's hard to convince them other ways.
Yeah.
He was a commie, by the way. Anyway, so how do we protect ourselves from our own cognitive biases? If you don't want to, because we're all susceptible to falling into these traps. We're like Nazi Germany or Stalinist Soviet didn't just happen because they were bad people cheering for these things. Like human beings are flawed. We do have our cognitive biases, and I think many of them are like the psychological rationalization for why we do things. Like how do we remain skeptical enough, and how do we remain intellectually honest is the question, I guess.
Yeah, always got to check your premises. Like for me, and that's why is in my vows actually like being intellectually honest and open to reason, and passionate about that, curious, where you got to check your premises. And again, that's like where for me it comes back to that's how progression happens. And if you stop that, then you stop kind of progressing in a sense, or enabling that possibility. So yeah, and it's always checking the premises, but it's like, okay, what area of knowledge is this? Is this a priori? Is it like, what's the methodology I need to engage with? Is it axiomatic and deductive, or is it, is this hypothetical? Is this empirical? Is like, do I use a scientific method? Is it like always open to testing? And so understanding epistemology, like the validity of knowledge, is vital to be able to use the correct lens in the correct time and place for what you're looking at. And then understanding reality, like interwoven reality, right? Where it comes back, like conceptually, we can look at one area at a time, but we can understand that they're like the different sides of the same coin. I mean, I think epistemology is a massive part of that. Yeah. If you put your, a lot of people feel like they're getting attacked, like, or roles. You're discussing ideas and they associate themselves with those ideas. They like a role association of sorts. And so you're attacking the idea, you feel like they're getting attacked. I feel if you bank it on a principle, which is like being intellectually honest, open to reason, if you're wrong, like it's far easier to, accept that and great, like now I've improved and progressed and I don't need to be wrong again. And I think there's an element to this where sometimes I come across are there different methods for online versus in person. I think online, where there is no time limit per se, you can pause, think, consider, review, come back. Versus in person, it's like more inclined to be, thinking about your response, or it's a debate, or whatever it is. It's like less. So I've got more of a higher threshold on like online discourse, although I probably shouldn't. Like maybe I'm projecting in that regard, where others don't, get reference, and then I go down that rabbit hole. So I've got to be kind of conscious of that. But to me, it's there's that element of checking your premises, essentially being aware of your own ignorance, like, and there's nothing wrong with being ignorant, like, but it's knowing it. That's the wisdom piece, where I know the areas that I'm passionate about and not, but then anything like empirical, scientific, natural sciences, whatever it is, areas that I know, like, that's I'm not banking on here. And so that's why I tend to have my discussions with commentary remains on things that are a priori, or things that are axiomatic, inductive, where it is a definitive answer of sorts. And it's not like, I like subjectively like this and you like that, and cool, great. It's like, no, one of us is wrong and one of us is right. Like 1 + 1 is 2 or 1 + 1 is 3. One of us is right, and either it's me or it's you. If it's me, I want to know. If it's you, well, you need to be open to that and accept that. And if you then double down or triple down, when you've engaged and I've shown the best resources that exist, that it shows 1 + 1 is 2, and you keep saying it's 3, then like my respect levels decrease, and you then get treated more as a soundboard and someone to be ridiculed than someone to be respected. And yeah, that's my approach. And so partly there's an element of, by pushing hard, I want my be pushed hard back. And so like if someone was, and maybe this is wrong, but if so I'm saying 1 + 1 is 3 and someone knows it's 2 and I'm being an arsehole about it, I want them to be like, critique me, have the incentive to push back and say why I'm wrong, so I can adapt and understand and then go, great. But you got to be available to do that.
We had an example of this last week, which is like the first time I think that I've seen you be wrong online, and that is when you said Swedish cantons, meaning Swiss cantons.
Yeah.
So I pointed out, I think you mean Swiss cantons, and you immediately corrected yourself and said, yes, of course, it's in Switzerland, not in Sweden. So, but I think that was actually the first time that I've ever seen you be wrong online. Then again, there's a bunch of other incentives online too, especially nowadays when, the whole incentive to be an influencer really wasn't there it wasn't as prevalent 10 years ago as it is now. Now you can actually just blurt out your shit online and make a living. I mean, I'm an example of it. Like I live online now as opposed to in my fiat job, and I like it a lot more. But I'm also very aware that is the algorithms, this or that algorithm is skewing my perspective somehow, and I need to check myself a lot. And I don't think there's a one size fits all solution.
There's often a critique of like libertarians, like you're talking amongst yourselves, or like say maybe Bitcoiners talking amongst yourselves, and like, is that like the cult equivalent or your own bubble per se? And to me, it's like it's a bubble of decency, common decency that, to weather the storm, because 99%, like every other transaction, engagement, interaction throughout the day is outside that bubble. Like it's work, it's where it's like, public, normie land, whatever it is. So it's like, no, you're not. It's like you've got there's a safe haven of sorts that you could kind of rely on and critique the clown world that it is sometimes, the fiat mindset.
No, like we are the ones leaving the cult. We're not the cult. Like the cult is the people that live in unverifiable money. They have this thing with a literal fucking Illuminati pyramid right there, and they think it's legit.
Yeah.
So we're the ones that call the cult out, and that we're the deserters. We're the ones leaving, not the ones in a cult. So they live in a bubble, we don't, and I'm gonna die on this hill proudly.
Yeah. There was a recent poll like a Cobden Center, and this is like maybe 2005 or something, but it was on the concept of fractional reserve banking, and it was asking the UK. It was a question around prying. Like fractional reserve bankers claim that depositors, on like people believe accept that they're the contract, they're giving their money to the bank and it's no longer theirs. It's the banks, and the banks can do what they want with it. The fractional reserve is like, that's the claim. So people it's no fraud because people are aware of that. And it was like the poll, which was fairly widely done, normal folks out there, I think 3,000, 4,000 people or whatever, but it was something like 70% believe that the bank actually had, like, it's their money still. They don't understand it's not theirs anymore, like from a current legal positives perspective. And it's like, no. And Rothbard jokes about it where he's like, a whole university, like lecture, many talks over like semesters from his, quote unquote propaganda on the money's not there, and still like, some folks thinking that the money is still there, folks, and it's like, it's not. Yeah, so it's
No, I was reminded of that a couple of years back when I needed to withdraw a lot of cash for a certain reason. And the bank asks me what I'm going to do with the money. I should be asking them what they are going to do with my money. Otherwise, it isn't my money, it's theirs. And like, why do I need the custodian's permission to use my shit? It's like so backwards and so weird. So the way I see it now is that the bank is your bank account is a 2 out of 3 multi-sig solution between you, the bank, and the government. And both the government and the bank have master keys. You're the only one that needs the consent of at least one of the others to use your money. So it's a pretty bad multi-sig setup.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Where can people find more? You recently posted some excellent slides on explaining some fundamental praxeological insights, Conrad Graf stuff and Mises stuff, great stuff. And you made them yourself, I think? Like
no,
using an AI or something?
The power of AI, but like,
yeah, but that's a tool. It's still you, Conza. It's not, the AI is not you.
Vetted by myself with a highly critical eye that essentially, it's like nothing getting, it's very efficient though, I got to say. Like I was actually quite impressed with what is produced, like not much prompting at all, but masterful imagery as well. So, I mean, that's just on X, just Conza handle. There's still like lifelong projects in the background, like the Praxeology podcast that have like, it's got authenticity there, but it's just time factor and I'm all or nothing with things. And so it's in the nothing bucket at the moment, but hopefully that ticks over. It will at some point to the all phase. But until then, just hassling folks economically, everyone like economically illiterate, Deb syndrome is online and just trying to keep Bitcoin as money only and improve, not reduce its quality is the kind of key concern, and all on board for anyone who's doing that.
So you're Conza on X and you have your website too, right? What's
there's an old Tumblr that has like a whole bunch of stuff. So conza.tumblr.com.
It's in your profile, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's for like the gems. So if there's any kind of topic that hits maybe not so much Bitcoin related stuff, but like Austro-libertarianism stuff, like go to the tag. I've basically read everything that exists, and over the years, it's like fine tuned to. It's not like, oh, this is a nice quote. It's like, no, I've gotten so annoyed. It's like seeing the same argument so many times that I became efficient at like, this is the best argument that exists. Like after doing all the proof of work around reading all the materials, this strikes at the root of that misconception. This was what also convinced me. So like I used to be a statist. I used to think the exact same as the person I'm engaging with, generally speaking. What convinced me otherwise? And it was like, yes, this. So I've saved that with a reference to like trailhead of sorts. So good starting point for anyone, any kind of topic, to then save the hassle of reading all the primary source material. But it's trailhead to go do that. But interesting with the AI stuff it's like used Notebook. So like Notebook LM, where I think it's using Gemini 3 or something behind the scenes, but basically your own resources you can add. So like dumping all the Misesian 50 resources or like libertarian based stuff or articles, key monographs, and then you kind of engage in that only. It's not like generative replies elsewhere. It only uses those resources. You can be very specific with it. And so like, somewhere in human action, like this came up. So instead of me just up here now, I'm trying to empower that as well. So like, I think that's democratizing, for one of a terrible name, but wanting to share that out. So you can make like slides and quips and like, it's a good learning tool. So I've recently been engaged playing with that, so to speak, and it's done a lot of heavy lifting, where I'm more used to critiquing stuff. It's a lot harder for me, generally speaking, to find my voice and try and produce stuff. A lot slower going because I'm highly critical of myself. So perfect's the enemy of the good, more or less. So maybe that will change some point. But that's currently where I'm at. There's a YouTube channel as well of like clips. So of Conza on YouTube, but clips of things like Mises lectures that have, say, Bob Murphy is an example on security. I've like clipped all the key parts of that, given I've like needed that so many times to share with people. And that's kind of the emphasis, where it's, hey, I see what your misconception is really quite clearly. Like, here's the best resource. And if you're intellectually honest and curious and open to reason, you'll go read it or view it and go, okay. But it's not necessarily always the case. So it is what it is.
Not always, no. One of the best tips I ever got on the creative process and moving forward is from Trey Parker of South Park fame. There's a documentary how they make that, and he says that he could have spent 2 more months on the script. He spends 2 days on the script, and he could have spent 2 more months, and it would have been 5% better. So he aims for 95% perfection and not 100. And that's such a great unlocker of like just momentum in your creative process. If you're a perfectionist, you get stuck, and which means you never get to your next project, which would have been even better than the first one. So like you need to kill your darlings at some point. I found that very helpful myself anyway. So final question, what is Konrad Graf up to these days?
Great question. Personal stuff, I think, like in terms of like family and kids and whatnot. So I think he's I'm trying to goad him to kind of coming back on the front lines with us. But the way I see it is like, Stefan Kinsella is kind of known with being like proper, like hopper at every angle, like, of sorts in that regard, like, and he accepts that. And I feel like I'm the same with Konrad Graf's stuff. But yeah, it's part of the piece about what was the initial click for me with him in that regard was I saw so much a quagmire, whatever it is, of like the debates with natural law and natural rights and consequentialism, utilitarianism, all this stuff of like 2,000 years of like philosophical baggage and Hopper's a priori of argumentation and argumentation ethics kind of cuts through that. But what Conrad's done when he wrote this action-based jurisprudence monograph, journal article, 2011, which phenomenal, please read, is it kind of cleared up the scene, like not necessarily changing much from like Hopper's perspective, Austro-libertarianism, all the hard yakka that Rothbard has done and Hopper, but it was recategorizing, clarifying its position. And it's that whole image of so a tree, a trunk of, you've got the first implications of like action at the bottom of the trunk, and then the roots, and then it's like the trunk is essentially, well, there's like 2 branches, like Mises talked about. Economics is the best elaborated branch of praxeology, and then it's kind of left over a question of, well, what's the other branch? And the answer is legal theory or property theory, which it's essentially the angle is rightfully putting them in their place. And instead of the old trope of, Bloch talking about like, rights-based, like economics is value-free, is, work-free, is that, and then you've got, it's libertarianism, it's ethics, it's ought-based. And like, no, like Hopper it shatters that with his a priori of argumentation and communication. So it's like clearing that up and that framework, and then you avoid like 2,000 years of philosophical baggage essentially. And so that's the initial click. But yeah, what's he up to these days? I like to think is just, I've got several things he's written over the years that haven't been published that are phenomenal. I'm hoping he's a master of continuing going back and cleaning things up. So hopefully there's less perfection from him in that regard, and we see some.
No, that's fantastic. Fantastic. The jurisprudence essay is excellent. A name that pops into my mind when we talk about lawful and legal is Frank van Doon. I read about when writing the praxeology book, and just this distinction between lawful, which is law according to discoverable law, in other words, property rights, and legal, which is like made up by man, which is what we live under in this
legislation,
victimless crime bullshit that the states impose on us, while there is actually a discoverable way of living in a civilized way. And it's not an ought, it's an is, or at least it's as close to an ought not as science can ever get.
It informs. It's like, this is theft, this is aggression, and then ought you do that or not? Like that's ethics comes into it, and like obviously, it essentially it transcends the is ought divide by bench is essentially making the case that the NAP, the non-aggression principle, is the only justifiable norm, essentially, through his arguments, which is mind-blowing.
The only universal and timeless one, the right to be left alone. Yeah. So with that, thank you very much for coming on the show. This is one of the longest episodes I've done in a while. I hope people appreciate it. Go follow Conza. Go read up on all the Austrian economics literature you can find, except the bad one. And then go like, subscribe, comment, and brush your teeth and all of that. And see you next time. I mean, you're welcome back on whenever you want. We'll keep the conversation going, and hope people get something out of this.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. This has been the Bitcoin Infinity Show. Thanks for watching.